Wife, I found you a well-paid summer job. You'll earn money, will buy me a car. Pack your things, tomorrow you're flying out. And when he decided to greet his obedient little wife upon her return, he nearly went gray on the spot when he saw him. Good afternoon, dear listeners. Every family hides its own secrets, joys, and sorrows. Today we will meet people whose story makes us reflect on the true value of close relationships. Evening twilight enveloped the two-room apartment on the third floor of a high-rise building built back in the 80s when architects believed in a bright future and in saving square meters. Catalina stood at the kitchen sink, mechanically rinsing dishes under a stream of warm water, her thoughts popping like soap bubbles one after another before they could form into anything concrete. Behind the wall, the neighbors had turned up their television, and the news anchor's voice mixed with the sizzling of the frying pan where empanadas for tomorrow's dinner were finishing up. The sound of a key in the lock made her flinch, although Geronimo came home from work every day at exactly the same time, like a Swiss watch wound for the strict rhythm of family life. Catalina quickly wiped her hands on a towel with faded flowers, a gift from her mother-in-law 3 years ago, and turned toward her husband. Geronimo appeared in the doorway of the kitchen with the look of a man who had either swallowed a canary or won the lottery. His face, usually tired after a day's work, now shone with satisfaction, and in his eyes danced mischievous sparks Catalina hadn't seen for many months. "Catalinita, my darling," he began without even taking off his jacket, "I've got news for you. Such news that at first you probably won't believe it." Catalina felt her heart beat faster, the pounding echoing in her temples with a faint tremor. In their family, unexpected news usually meant trouble. A hike in utility bills, a cut in his work bonus, or some misfortune among relatives demanding urgent financial help. "What happened, Geronimo?" she asked softly, her voice betraying a tremor on the last syllable. "Remember Serafin Montoya, the guy I served with in the army?" Geronimo pulled off his jacket and hung it over the chair. His movements were quick, nervous, like those of someone brimming with important information. "He's in the tourism business now, runs hotels on the coast." Catalina nodded, vaguely recalling a short young man with cheerful eyes who had visited them a few times in the early years of their marriage, drinking coffee with cookies and telling army stories. "Well," Geronimo continued, sitting on the edge of the chair, his eyes burning, "he calls me today and says, they need a woman for the summer to work as an entertainer, at a good hotel with foreigners, entertaining kids, running contests. And the pay, hold on to your seat. In 3 months, you can earn as many dollars as we don't see in half a year." His words hung in the air, heavy and unclear, like a storm cloud. Catalina stared at him, trying to process what she had just heard, but her thoughts scattered in every direction like startled sparrows. "And" was all she managed to squeeze out, her mouth suddenly dry. "What do you mean, and? You'll go work, of course." Geronimo jumped up and began pacing the tiny kitchen, waving his hands. "Imagine, in just 1 summer, you'll earn enough. We'll buy a car, a new one, a proper one, not this wreck that's falling apart." At that moment, Ismael, Geronimo's 16-year-old son from his first marriage, lanky and thin as a young palm tree, poked his head into the kitchen. His hair was tousled from a day at school, and on his face played that particular teenage smirk that could mean anything, from genuine amusement to a hidden disdain for the adult world. "What are you arguing about?" he asked, opening the fridge and grabbing a yogurt. "Not arguing, discussing," Geronimo corrected him. "They're offering your mom a summer job." "What job?" Ismael looked at Catalina with unexpected interest. "An entertainer at a resort," she answered, and her own voice sounded foreign, as if someone else had spoken the words. "Cool!" Ismael exclaimed, his eyes lighting up. "Where?" "By the sea. And what would you have to do?" Geronimo eagerly began repeating to his son everything he had learned from his army buddy. Catalina listened as he described the work awaiting her, as though it was meant for someone else entirely. Children's parties, poolside contests, evening shows, chatting with vacationing families. All of it seemed so far from her measured life as a housewife that she couldn't imagine herself in the role of a cheerful entertainer. "But what about Emiliano?" she suddenly blurted, remembering their younger son. "Emiliano will stay with me," Geronimo replied confidently. "We'll manage somehow." Ismail will help, and Grandma's nearby, and you'll earn us a car. Just then, 8-year-old Emiliano came into the kitchen, still carrying the dust of school on his clothes. His face was serious and concentrated, like that of a little adult trying to make sense of the complicated world of grown-ups. "Mama, why is everyone so loud?" he asked, coming up to Catalina and pressing against her leg. She stroked her son's head, feeling his soft hair slip through her fingers, and suddenly realized how unreal all this seemed. Here she was, standing in her own kitchen, where she knew every crack in the tiles and every stain on the ceiling. And her husband was suggesting she leave everything behind and go away for 3 months to the seaside to work with strangers' children, while her own son would grow up without his mother. "Dad says Mom is going to work far, far away," Ismail explained to his younger brother, with a touch of malice in his voice. "By the sea, entertaining rich uncles and aunties." "And I'll go with you?" Emiliano asked at once, lifting his big gray eyes to his mother. "No, my son," Catalina said softly, crouching down so they were at the same level. "You'll stay with Dad and Ismail." The boy's face clouded immediately, and his lower lip trembled, betraying the tears that were about to come. Catalina knew this sign well and hurried to hug him, breathing in the scent of his hair, a mix of children's shampoo and school hallways. "Mom, why do you have to go?" Emiliano mumbled into her shoulder. Catalina looked over her son's head at her husband and saw in his eyes such certainty in the rightness of his decision that she suddenly felt like a little girl again, being told by adults what she had to do for her own good. "To earn money for a new car," Geronimo answered for her. "Mom will work 3 months and then we'll drive to the cottage in a brand new car instead of rattling around in this tin can." Dinner passed in a strange atmosphere of forced cheerfulness on Geronimo's part and confusion from everyone else. Ismail kept making jokes about his mother's upcoming departure. Emiliano sat in silence, poking at his arepa with a fork, while Catalina replied mechanically to questions, thinking how life can change in an instant, like the weather before a storm. After dinner, the phone rang, and Geronimo, looking pleased, announced it was his mother, Rosario. Catalina knew her mother-in-law would certainly learn about her son's plans and voice her opinion, which always carried weight in family decisions. "Hello, Rosario," Catalina greeted politely, taking the receiver from her husband's hand. "Catalina, dear," came the familiar voice on the line. "Geronimo told me about the job." "It's the right decision, good girl. It's useful for a young woman to see the world, and extra money never hurts. We'll manage the children. They're not so little anymore." Her mother-in-law's words landed like a final, bold period at the end of the discussion, and Catalina realized she had no real choice. The family had already decided for her, and all that remained was to accept and prepare for the inevitable. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, and the apartment sank into that peculiar silence that falls only in apartment blocks late at night, when life pauses until morning, Catalina sat on the bed, listening to Geronimo enthusiastically sharing details about the upcoming job. "Serafine says the team there is young and friendly," he said, unbuttoning his shirt. "The work isn't hard. Creative. You've worked in a school. You're good with kids. And the pay is excellent." "Geronimo," Catalina said quietly, "maybe it's not a good idea? Emiliano is still little. He's used to me always being here." "Oh, come on," her husband waved her off, sitting down on the edge of the bed. 3 months will fly by, and then we'll have a car. We'll be able to go to the cottage, take a proper vacation. No more rattling on buses all the time." He spoke about the future with such confidence as though he already saw their new life with a new car. But Catalina felt something uneasy stirring deep inside her, a foreboding of changes far greater than just the purchase of a vehicle. "What if I can't manage?" she asked, her voice quivering with uncertainty. "I've been at home for so many years. I'm not used to people anymore, to working." Geronimo turned toward her and took her hands. His palms were warm and dry, so familiar down to the tiniest lines and calluses. That touch brought her a little calm. "You'll manage," he said firmly. "You're smart, beautiful, great with kids. They'll train you there, prepare you properly. Serafine won't let me down. He knows me. He wouldn't offer something bad." When her husband fell asleep, breathing peacefully under the blanket, Catalina lay awake for a long time, listening to the night sounds of the house. Somewhere a faucet dripped in the bathroom. The floorboards creaked under the upstairs neighbor's feet. Outside, a car occasionally passed, slicing through the silence with the hiss of tires on asphalt. She thought of how, in 15 years of marriage, her life had become like clockwork. Wake up, breakfast, cleaning, lunch, picking up the children from school, dinner, sleep, day after day, month after month, year after year. When was the last time she did something just for herself, simply because she wanted to? When had she last felt like herself? Not Emiliano's mother, not Geronimo's wife, not Rosario's daughter-in-law, but simply Catalina. The next morning, Geronimo woke up in particularly high spirits and immediately began making plans. "I'll call Seraphine today. We'll get everything arranged," he said, eating breakfast in a rush. "Tomorrow we'll buy the ticket. The day after you'll fly. No point delaying. The sooner you start, the more you'll earn." Catalina silently poured him coffee, the reality of it all finally beginning to sink in. Tomorrow the ticket, the day after tomorrow the flight. Everything was happening so fast she couldn't keep up, as if she had been caught by a swift river's current and could no longer reach the shore. "Maybe we should think it over," she tried once more. "I've never worked as an entertainer. I don't even know what that really means." "What's there to think about?" Geronimo waved impatiently. "An opportunity like this might never come again. Or do you want to sit at home your whole life? The guys at work will envy me. My wife's the one making money. Not like theirs." There was pride in his voice, but to Catalina it sounded less like pride in her and more like pride in himself. So resourceful and enterprising, having found a way to get money for a new car. After breakfast, once the children had gone to school, Geronimo really did call his friend. Catalina heard him loudly and cheerfully discussing the details of her future job, as if he were talking about buying a new television or making weekend plans. "All set," he announced after hanging up. "Seraphine arranged everything. Tomorrow we'll get the ticket, and in the evening you pack your suitcase. He says they'll help with housing and documents. Just do your job well. Don't let me down." There was something in that last phrase that made Catalina flinch. Don't let me down. So she wasn't going for herself, not for her own experience or growth, but so her husband wouldn't lose face before his friend and to earn money for his dream. The day rushed by in a blur of packing and preparation. Geronimo bought the plane ticket. Catalina pulled an old suitcase out of the closet, still smelling faintly of mothballs and the rare trips to visit relatives. In the evening, when the children came home from school, she tried to explain what was happening, but the words stuck in her throat like lumps of unspoken fear. Emiliano silently watched as his mother folded a summer dress and a swimsuit she hadn't worn in 3 years into the suitcase. His serious eyes were filled with incomprehension and a hidden hurt at the adults who made decisions, without asking the opinion of those most affected. "Mom, do you promise you'll come back?" he asked suddenly, and in his voice was such an adult kind of fear that Catalina's heart ached. "Of course I'll come back, sweetheart," she said, hugging him. "It's just a job, a temporary job." But even as she spoke the words, they rang false. Something inside her whispered that this trip would change much more than just the family budget. Late that night, when the house finally fell silent, Catalina stood by the kitchen window, holding the boarding pass for tomorrow's flight. The ticket was printed on thick paper, her fingertips feeling every letter of the text. The city outside was asleep, lit only by a few street lamps and glowing windows in the buildings across the street. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon and the clouds, a new life awaited her. Temporary, perhaps, but unknown and frightening. In the reflection of the window glass, she saw her own face, tired, fuller from years of housework, with the first wrinkles by her eyes and the corners of her mouth turned down. When had she begun to look like all those other women her age who had forgotten themselves for the sake of their families? When had she stopped seeing the girl in the mirror who dreamed of adventure and believed life was full of wonder? The ticket in her hand was more than just a piece of paper with a flight number and seat assignment. It was a ticket into the unknown, into a life that might look nothing like the one she had known during her long marriage. And suddenly, staring at her reflection in the night window, Catalina felt something stir deep inside. Not fear, not anxiety, but something else, forgotten and almost unfamiliar. Anticipation. curiosity, the desire to discover this other Catalina, the one who worked, earned money, lived among strangers, and solved problems without her husband or mother-in-law. Tomorrow her life would change, for now just for 3 months. But who knew what might happen in that time? Who knew what kind of woman would return home, and whether she would be the same obedient wife and mother she had been all these years? The ticket rustled in her fingers like the whisper of changes that could no longer be stopped. The airplane touched down with a light jolt, and Catalina's heart skipped at the realization that there was no turning back. Beyond the window stretched the unfamiliar expanse of a sun-drenched airport, and the air that rushed into the cabin when the doors opened was filled with the scents of the sea and something tropical, nothing like the familiar smells of her hometown. Her bag felt unexpectedly heavy as she walked down the long airport corridor among a stream of sun-tanned vacationers and businessmen in light suits. Her simple summer dress, which had seemed perfectly suitable at home, looked drab and provincial here against the bright outfits of the other passengers. At the exit, a young man was waiting with a sign, her name written on it in uneven letters. He turned out to be Valentino, one of the entertainers, tasked with escorting her to the hotel and helping with her initial arrangements. "Catalina," he said brightly, extending his hand. "Hi, I'm Valentino. Welcome to our sunny paradise. How was the flight? Didn't get airsick?" "Fine, thank you," Catalina replied, feeling awkward at the familiarity of this stranger. The road to the hotel wound along a highway with the sea glittering on one side in all shades of blue and turquoise, and on the other, hills rising covered in thick greenery. Catalina pressed against the window of the minibus, greedily drinking in the scenery that looked like a backdrop from a beautiful film about faraway lands. "First time working on the coast?" Valentino asked, skillfully maneuvering between cars. "First time working as an entertainer at all," Catalina admitted honestly. "I used to teach at school, and then I stayed home with the kids." "Ah, I see," Valentino nodded. "Don't worry, you'll get into it fast. It's a great job, the people are good. The main thing is to smile often and not be shy. Kids here love having fun." The hotel greeted them with the coolness of air conditioning and marble floors that reflected the light from huge crystal chandeliers. Everything here exuded luxury and comfort, the kind Catalina had only been used to seeing on television screens or the pages of magazines. At the reception, she was registered quickly and efficiently. They gave her the keys to a room in the staff building and a pass with a photo, in which she looked frightened and confused. The room turned out to be small but cozy, with a view of the sea and a little balcony where 2 plastic chairs and a round table stood. Catalina put her bag on the floor and stepped out onto the balcony, immediately wrapped in the warm sea breeze that smelled of salt and seaweed. For the first time in many years, she was completely alone in an unfamiliar place, without children, without her husband, without the need to cook dinner or check homework. The thought was both frightening and fascinating, like looking down from a great height. An hour later, Consuelo, the senior animator, came for her, a lively woman of about 30, with a mane of curly chestnut hair and laughing brown eyes. "Well, newbie, ready for your baptism by fire?" she asked, giving Catalina an appraising look. "Today we've got the kids' disco, tomorrow a drawing contest, and the day after that water polo. You won't be bored." "I'm a little nervous," Catalina admitted. "It's been a long time since I worked with children." "Oh, don't worry about it," Consuelo waved her hand. "It's obvious you're one of those homely, warm types. Kids sense that right away. The main thing is, don't hold back. They love it when adults act like kids." Her first workday began at 4 in the afternoon. Catalina put on the bright t-shirt with the hotel's logo they had given her in the costume room and headed to the children's pool, where a small crowd of kids of different ages had already gathered. "Kids, meet Aunt Catalina. She's going to play with us," Consuelo announced, and a dozen pairs of eyes turned to the newcomer with curiosity and expectation. At first, things didn't go smoothly. Catalina was shy, her voice sounded uncertain, and her movements were stiff. The children picked up on it right away, started fussing and getting distracted. But gradually, recalling her schoolwork and motherhood experience, she began to loosen up. "Now we're all going to turn into sea animals," she announced, and she was the first to portray a dolphin jumping out of the water. The children eagerly joined the game, and within half an hour, Catalina already felt much more confident. The children's laughter, their joyful shouts and applause warmed her soul in a way nothing had for many months. After the disco, when the children ran off to their rooms with their parents, the animators gathered in the staff cafe to discuss the day and plan for tomorrow. "Not bad for a first time," Consuelo said, sitting next to Catalina at the table. "It's clear you know how to work with kids. Tomorrow will be easier." "Thank you," Catalina replied, feeling a strange mix of fatigue and satisfaction. "And how long have you been working here?" "This is my third season," Consuelo answered. "It pulls you in. Freedom, the sea, good money. Back home, I wouldn't earn this many dollars in a year." "Doesn't your family miss you?" Catalina asked cautiously. Consuelo smirked and shook her head. "What family? I'm a free bird. Got married at 22, divorced a year later, decided it's better to live for myself than drag someone else's problems around." Her words echoed strangely in Catalina's soul. To live for yourself. When was the last time she thought about what she personally wanted and not what her family, children, or husband needed? In the evening, finally alone in her room, Catalina went out onto the balcony and took out her phone to call home. On the other end, Geronimo's voice sounded tired and slightly irritable. "So, how's it going?" "You got there okay?" he asked without much enthusiasm. "I arrived fine, already working," Catalina replied, listening to the sound of the sea below. "And how are things there? How's Emiliano?" "Everything's fine. We had dinner. He did his homework. Already went to bed. Ismael's home too." Her husband's voice carried fatigue, and Catalina felt a pang of guilt. He must be having a hard time alone with the kids, without her. "Geronimo, maybe I should come back," she asked, surprising even herself. "What if it's too hard for you without me?" "Don't talk nonsense," Geronimo brushed it off. "We're not little kids, we'll manage. You work, make money. It's only temporary." After the call, Catalina stood on the balcony for a long time, listening to the surf and gazing at the stars, which here seemed brighter and closer than at home. A strange sense of loneliness mingled with an unfamiliar feeling of freedom. The days began to flow in the steady rhythm of resort work. In the mornings, Catalina woke to the cries of seagulls outside her window, had breakfast in the staff cafeteria with the other animators, and then spent the entire day with the vacationers' children. Little by little, she grew more confident in her role as cheerful Aunt Catalina, who could make a crying child laugh, organize a fun game, and connect even with the most stubborn toddler. The work demanded constant energy, but in return gave her something she had been missing in her home life, a sense of her own importance and value. "Aunt Catalina, will you play with us again tomorrow?" asked 5-year-old Sophia, speaking with an American accent. "Of course, sunshine," Catalina replied, adjusting the girl's braids. "Tomorrow we'll be building sandcastles." In such moments, she felt truly alive and needed, not just an appendage to her husband and children, but an independent person with her own talents and abilities. 2 weeks into the job, Rodrigo, the head of the entertainment program, approached her, a man of about 35, with a pleasant face and attentive eyes. "Catalina, can I talk to you?" he asked after the evening program ended. "Of course," she replied, feeling her heartbeat quicken with anxiety. "Is something wrong with my work?" "Quite the opposite," Rodrigo smiled. "The kids adore you, the parents are happy. You're doing great. I wanted to offer you some extra duties, hosting evening shows for adults. The pay is good." Catalina hesitated. Extra work meant more money, and that meant her goal for this trip could be achieved faster. But on the other hand, she had only just gotten used to working with children, and now she was being offered something completely new. "I'll think about it," she said. "No rush," Rodrigo replied gently. "But know this, you can handle it. You have something not everyone does, the ability to be natural. People sense that and are drawn to it." His words warmed her soul more than any compliment from her husband in recent years. When was the last time Geronimo had told her something kind, just because, without reason or ulterior motive? Meanwhile, things at home weren't going as smoothly as Geronimo had expected. Used to his wife taking care of all the household matters, he was suddenly faced with a host of unforeseen problems. The first week passed relatively calmly. Ismael helped with cooking, Emiliano behaved himself, and the grandmother came by every day to check in. "Dad, why is the milk sour?" Emiliano asked at breakfast in the second week. Geronimo opened the fridge and realized he had forgotten to buy fresh milk, and the old one had indeed gone bad. "Never mind, you'll drink juice," he muttered, irritated at having to deal with such trifles. "But Mom always made sure the milk was fresh," Emiliano remarked, and there was a note of longing for maternal care in his voice. "Mom's working right now," Geronimo snapped. "We have to manage on our own." But managing grew harder. He forgot to wash the school uniform. There was nothing suitable for dinner in the fridge. Emiliano caught a cold, and the medicine cabinet was missing children's remedies. "Geronimo," Rosario said one day when she stopped by, "maybe you should call Catalina and ask her to come back. You see how hard it is for you alone." "Mom, everything's fine," Geronimo lied, clearing yesterday's unwashed dishes from the kitchen table. "We're managing." But deep down, he was beginning to realize he had underestimated the sheer amount of work his wife had done. The house demanded constant attention, the children needed care and supervision, and on top of it all, he still had his regular job, which drained his time and energy. Catalina's calls grew fewer and shorter. At first, Geronimo chalked it up to her being busy, but gradually he noticed something new in her voice, confidence that hadn't been there before. "How's work?" he asked during one of their brief conversations. "Good," Catalina replied. "The kids love me, my colleagues are nice, the management is satisfied." "Well, that's great," Geronimo would say, but something in her tone unsettled him. Before, Catalina used to share everything in detail, her worries, her doubts. Now her answers were brief and formal. "When are you coming back?" he asked. "As we agreed, at the end of the summer," she replied. 2 more months left." 2 months felt like an eternity to Geronimo. He was beginning to realize that his wife was not just a housewife who cooked and cleaned. She had been the backbone of the family, the one who held their household together and created the feeling of home. Meanwhile, Catalina was becoming more and more immersed in her new life. Working with children brought her joy, her colleagues gave her fresh impressions, and evenings on the balcony overlooking the sea gave her peace and time to reflect on life. "Catalina, you look especially beautiful tonight," Rodrigo said after another program. "Something has changed in you over these weeks." Catalina looked at herself in the mirror in the staff changing room and did indeed see the difference. Her face was more open, her eyes sparkled, and her movements had grown more confident. "Probably the sun and the sea," she answered, though she knew it wasn't just that. For the first time in many years, she felt like an independent person, capable of making decisions and taking responsibility for her own life. It was intoxicating and a little frightening. That same evening, sitting on the balcony and listening to the sound of the surf, Catalina thought about how in 2 months she would have to return to her old life, to the kitchen and laundry, to parent-teacher meetings and family dinners, to the role of obedient wife and caring mother. But would she still be the same? Could she slip back into the shell of submission and self-denial in which she had lived the past years? Or had these weeks of freedom and independence changed her so much that there would be no way back? The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Her husband's name lit up on the screen. "Hello," she said, picking up. "Catalina, there's a situation," Geronimo began in a weary voice. "Emiliano's sick, his fever is high, and the pediatrician can't come until tomorrow." "What hurts?" "How high is the fever?" Catalina asked anxiously, her maternal instinct immediately overwhelming every other thought. "His throat's red. The fever is 38.5, Geronimo answered. "I don't know what to do." "Usually you always knew." There was confusion in his voice and a hidden plea for help. Catalina felt her heart tighten with worry for her son, and at the same time with the realization that, for the first time in years, her husband needed her not as a housekeeper, but as a partner and support. "Give him the fever medicine from the cabinet," she said, "and make sure he drinks plenty of warm fluids. If the fever doesn't go down by morning, go straight to the doctor." "All right," Geronimo sighed in relief. "Catalina, I miss you. Really miss you." Those words sounded so sincere that Catalina caught her breath. How many years had she waited for her husband to say something like that? "I miss you too," she replied softly, and it was the truth. After the call, Catalina sat on the balcony for a long time, torn by conflicting emotions. On the one hand, her family needed her, and her mother's heart longed to fly home to her sick child. On the other hand, she had only just begun to feel alive and valued, not only as a mother and wife, but as an independent woman. The compromise came on its own. Tomorrow she would call home to check on Emiliano. If he was better, she would keep working. If worse, she would return immediately. For now, she would remain here, in this new life that gave her so many unexpected gifts. She could only hope that when the time came to return home, she would find a way not to lose what she had discovered here. Amid the sea and the sun, the children's laughter, and the sense of her own worth. The next morning, Catalina woke before her alarm, anxious thoughts of Emiliano crowding her mind. The sun was just rising over the horizon, painting the sea in soft pink tones. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of salt water and blooming oleanders beneath the hotel windows. With a pounding heart, she dialed the home number, bracing herself for bad news. "Hello," Geronimo answered in a sleepy voice. "How's Emiliano?" Catalina asked immediately, wasting no time on greetings. "Better," her husband sighed with relief. The fever broke during the night, and in the morning he was already cheerful. "Looks like just a common cold." "Thank God," Catalina exhaled, feeling a heavy weight lift from her shoulders. "And you? Aren't you too tired?" "It's fine. We're managing," Geronimo replied, though his voice betrayed fatigue. "You just work and don't worry about us." After the call, Catalina stepped out onto the balcony and stood for a long while, watching the resort awaken. The first vacationers appeared by the pool, waiters were setting tables in the open cafe, and gardeners were watering flower beds full of bright blossoms. In a month of working here, she had come to love these quiet morning minutes before the rush of a busy day. At home, mornings had always been hectic, getting the kids ready for school, making breakfast, checking that everyone had everything they needed. Here she could allow herself a few moments just to be, neither mother nor wife, but simply a woman welcoming a new day by the sea. In the staff cafeteria, Consuelo greeted her with a cup of fragrant coffee and a media luna. "So did you sleep well?" she asked, sitting down across from her. "You looked worried yesterday." "My son was sick at home. I was anxious," Catalina explained, "but he's better today." "I understand," Consuelo nodded. "A mother's heart feels things even from afar. But don't eat yourself up with worry. Kids get sick. It's normal. You're needed here too." "Consuelo, don't you regret not starting a family?" Catalina asked unexpectedly, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Honestly, sometimes I do," her friend answered thoughtfully, "especially when I see happy kids with their parents. But then I remember how miserable I was in marriage, how trapped I felt, and I know I made the right choice. But isn't it possible to combine family and personal freedom?" Consuelo smirked and shook her head. "Theoretically, yes, but in practice rarely, especially in our culture, where men are used to women living only for the family. You can see it yourself, how your husband reacts to your independence." Those words made Catalina pause and think. Indeed, Geronimo regarded her job as a temporary necessity, a way to earn money, not as an opportunity for her to fulfill herself and feel needed. The day passed in the usual rhythm of children's games and activities. Catalina noticed that her work was becoming easier and more confident. The children responded to her with greater enthusiasm, and her colleagues increasingly turned to her for advice or help. "Catalina," Rodrigo approached her after the evening program, "have you decided about the extra work? Tomorrow we have a big show for adults, and we need a co-host." "What would I have to do?" she asked, feeling both interest and nervousness. "Mostly interact with the audience, run contests, keep up the atmosphere," he explained. "You're great with people. It's obvious from the way the kids flock to you." "I'll give it a try," Catalina decided. "If I mess up, don't be too hard on me." "If you mess up, I won't ask you next time," Rodrigo smiled, "but I'm sure you'll do great." That evening, alone in her room, Catalina sat down to write a long letter to Emiliano. During their time apart, she had realized how important it was to stay connected with her son, not just through brief phone calls, but through deeper communication. "My dear boy," she wrote, "Mom misses you very much and thinks of you every day. It's beautiful here, like in a fairy tale. But without you, the beauty feels incomplete. Tell me how things are at school, who your friends are, what interesting things are happening." Writing the letter turned out to be unexpectedly difficult. What could she share with an 8-year-old about her inner changes and discoveries? How could she explain that she was changing, becoming someone new, but that this didn't mean she loved him any less? Meanwhile, back home, the situation was steadily worsening. Geronimo was growing more exhausted from juggling work and household duties. Ismael began to take advantage of the situation, becoming less disciplined, while Emiliano, though recovered, grew more demanding and clingy toward his father. "Dad, when is Mom coming back?" the boy asked every day. "Soon, son, soon," Geronimo would reply, but soon stretched into eternity. Weekends were the hardest. Before Catalina would spend time with the children, take them to the park or to their grandmother's, cook special meals. Geronimo had grown used to Saturdays and Sundays, being days of rest from work and household concerns. Now weekends turned into trials. The children demanded attention, the house needed cleaning, and the fridge needed restocking. "Ismael, at least help with the cooking," Geronimo asked one Saturday. "Dad, I've got my own stuff," the teenager brushed him off. "I need to study for a test. And Emiliano's bothering me, always underfoot." "Maybe we should call Grandma," Ismael suggested. "No, we need to handle this ourselves," Geronimo replied stubbornly. But handling it was getting harder and harder. By the end of the third week apart, the apartment looked as though a hurricane had passed through it. Toys were scattered everywhere, the sink was piled with dirty dishes, and a pyramid of laundry was growing in the kitchen corner. "Geronimo, what's going on here?" Rosario gasped when she dropped by to check on her grandson. "Mom, everything's under control," her son lied, trying to tidy up the worst of the mess. "Under control? This is a pigsty," she scolded. "Call Catalina, tell her to come back immediately." "Look what happens without a woman in the house." "Mom, she's working, earning money," Geronimo explained wearily. "We can't distract her." "Money?" Rosario exclaimed hotly. "Family's more important than money. The children are without their mother, the house is falling apart, and she's out there entertaining other people's kids." Her words cut painfully because deep down, Geronimo was beginning to think the same. Catalina had left to earn money for his dream, a new car, and instead, their family was coming apart at the seams. That evening, he called his wife, and the conversation was tense. "Catalina, things are bad here," he began, trying to sound calm. "The house is falling apart. Emiliano is fussy. Ismael is completely out of hand. I can't keep up." "What happened?" Catalina asked anxiously. "Is it something serious?" "Nothing in particular happened. It's just—" Geronimo fell silent, searching for words. "It's just that without you, this house isn't a home." "Maybe it's enough already? You've worked a month. Isn't that enough?" On the other end of the line, there was a long silence. Catalina stood on her balcony, looking up at the stars over the sea, feeling her whole world turn upside down. "Geronimo, we agreed on 3 months," she said quietly. 2 more months to go." "What difference does it make how much time is left?" he burst out. "The family's falling apart, and you're there. What are you even doing there? Babysitting other people's kids instead of your own?" "I'm working," Catalina answered firmly, and there was unexpected steel in her voice. "Earning money for your car in case you forgot." "My car?" Geronimo exclaimed indignantly. "Our car for the family." "You said back then, you'll earn the money, we'll buy me a car," Catalina reminded him. "You said me, not us." It was their first serious quarrel in all the years of marriage. Until now, Catalina had never argued with her husband, never contradicted him, never insisted on her own way. But now something had changed, in her voice, her tone, even her manner of speaking. "I don't remember saying that," Geronimo muttered, though he remembered perfectly well. "Geronimo, 2 more months," Catalina repeated. "Be patient. I'll come back, just as we agreed." "And what if I can't wait?" he asked. "What if I need my wife here at home, not thousands of kilometers away?" "Then that's your problem," Catalina replied coldly. And for the first time in her life, she hung up on him before he could finish. After that conversation, she couldn't sleep for a long time. Inside her, conflicting feelings battled, guilt toward her family and anger at her husband, who treated her work as a whim rather than her right to self-realization. The next morning, Consuelo noticed her mood. "What's wrong? You look upset," she asked at breakfast. "My husband demands that I come back early," Catalina explained. "He says everything's falling apart at home without me." "And what did you tell him?" "That I'll stay until the end, as we agreed." "Good for you," Consuelo approved. "Don't give in to emotional blackmail." Men love to shift responsibility onto women, then act surprised when we start living our own lives. But family really is more important than work, Catalina said hesitantly. Of course it is, Consuelo agreed. But why should family be only your responsibility? Why can't your husband handle the house without you? You managed just fine when he went away on business trips. Those words made Catalina think. Indeed, when Geronimo traveled for work, she never called him to complain about difficulties. She managed on her own, and everything was fine. That day, work didn't go well. Catalina was distracted, and the children sensed it, behaving restlessly. After lunch, Rodrigo approached her. "You're not yourself today," he remarked. "Problems?" "Family matters," Catalina answered briefly. "I understand," Rodrigo nodded. "It's hard to work when things at home are unsettled. But you know what I'll tell you? In a month, you've become a completely different person, more confident, brighter, more alive. It would be a shame if you hid back in a domestic shell again." "Maybe that is my place," Catalina asked sadly. "Home, family, children." "Your place is where you feel needed and happy," Rodrigo replied seriously. "And right now, you look happy here, at work." That same evening, something happened that completely changed Catalina's mood. During the children's disco, a woman of about 40 with grateful eyes approached her. "Excuse me for interrupting," she said. "I'm Carolina's mother. She's in your group. I just wanted to thank you." "For what?" Catalina asked in surprise. "Carolina is a very shy, withdrawn girl," the woman explained. "At home, she barely talks. She has no friends. But here, thanks to you, she has blossomed. She laughs, plays with other children, and has become more open. You're like a magician." Those words warmed her heart more than any compliment ever had. Catalina remembered the shy girl who, during the first days, had hidden behind her mother and refused to join in the games. Gradually, with patience and gentleness, she had managed to draw the child out, to involve her with her peers. "Thank you for your kind words," Catalina said. "Carolina is a wonderful girl. She just needed some time." "You have a gift," the woman said seriously. "Don't waste it." After that conversation, Catalina realized that her work was not just a way to earn money. It was a chance to help children, to make their holidays brighter and more fun, to give them the warmth and attention sometimes missing in everyday life. Late that evening, she stepped out onto the balcony again and gazed at the sea for a long time. The waves rolled steadily onto the shore, their sound soothing, helping her gather her thoughts. For the first time in many years, she felt truly needed, not only as a mother and wife, but also as a professional, as a person in her own right. The children loved her, her colleagues respected her, and the management valued her. When was the last time she had felt this way? Yet on the other hand, her family was waiting at home. A husband who was struggling alone, sons who missed their mother. Could she really sacrifice her loved ones for the sake of her own ambitions? The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Geronimo's name lit up on the screen. Catalina hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. "Catalina, forgive me for yesterday's conversation," her husband said right away. "I was wrong. I took it out on you." "Geronimo?" "No, let me finish," he interrupted. "I understand that it's hard for you there, that you're doing this for the family. But it's hard for me too without you. Not just with the housework, without you in general. I need you." There was sincerity in his voice, and Catalina's heart trembled. How many years had she waited to hear such words from her husband? "It's hard for me too," she admitted. "I miss you all very much." "Then come back," Geronimo asked softly. "You've already earned enough for the down payment." "But we agreed on 3 months." "To hell with agreements," her husband said passionately. "I want you home, with me and the kids." "The car can wait." Catalina closed her eyes and tried to picture her return home. The familiar apartment, the routine chores, the measured life of a housewife, and with that, the end of the new life she had only just begun to discover. "I'll think about it," she said at last. "Give me a few days to decide." "All right," Geronimo agreed. "Just don't take too long. I'll go crazy without you." After the call, Catalina sat on the balcony for a long time, listening to the surf and trying to sort out her feelings. Ahead of her lay a sleepless night of hard reflections and an even harder choice between family duty and personal happiness. The next days, Catalina lived in a state of inner struggle, which showed in everything. Her work, her sleep, her conversations with colleagues. Even the bright tropical sun seemed less warm, and the sea less gentle when her soul was torn between two worlds. Rodrigo noticed first. "Catalina, today you were working on autopilot," he said after the evening program. "The kids feel it, the parents too. What's going on?" "My husband wants me to come back early," she admitted, sitting on a bench by the pool. "He says everything at home is falling apart without me." "And what have you decided?" "I don't know," Catalina answered honestly. "On the one hand, family really is the most important thing. On the other hand, I've only just started to feel alive." Rodrigo sat down beside her, his face serious in the glow of the evening lamps. "You know what I think?" he said quietly. "A man needs time to understand a woman's worth. Sometimes it only happens when he loses her." "But I'm not losing him," Catalina objected. "I'm just working." "You're working and changing," Rodrigo pointed out. "And change frightens people, especially those who are used to stability." His words made sense, but they didn't make things any easier. Catalina felt stretched between two lives, like a rope in a tug-of-war. "Rodrigo, are you married?" she asked suddenly. "I was," he answered briefly. "Divorced 3 years ago. My wife couldn't understand why I chose work that made me happy instead of a boring but stable office job." "And do you regret it?" "The divorce?" "No," he shook his head. "I regret not being able to explain to her that a happy person can give a family much more than an unhappy but stable one." That Saturday, Consuelo suggested Catalina join the animator's team party at a small seaside restaurant. "You need a distraction," she insisted. "Otherwise, you'll drown in your family problems." The restaurant turned out to be a cozy spot overlooking the sea, with tables set right on the sand and colorful lanterns swaying overhead. A light sea breeze carried the smell of salt and grilled shrimp, while live music played somewhere in the distance. "How wonderful," Catalina said, truly relaxed for the first time in days. "When was the last time I sat in a restaurant just for pleasure?" "You see?" Consuelo smiled. "At home, you probably only ever sat in the kitchen." The whole animation team gathered at the table, cheerful, open people who knew how to enjoy life without burdening it with unnecessary worries. Valentino told funny stories about spoiled children, Ophelia shared her plans for the next season, and Sergio played popular songs on the guitar. Catalina listened to their conversations and thought about how long it had been since she'd been part of such a company. At home, their circle of communication was limited to relatives and neighbors, and the conversations revolved around the children, Geronimo's work, and household problems. "Catalina, what will you do after the season?" Ophelia asked. "Maybe you'll stay with us?" "I have a family, children at home," Catalina answered automatically. "So what?" Ophelia was surprised. "Many of our girls are married. They come to work every season. Their husbands and kids get used to it." "My husband probably won't get used to it," Catalina said with a sad smile. "Then he doesn't value you," Valentino said sharply. "If he saw how you work, how the children adore you, he'd treasure a wife like you, not keep you locked up inside four walls." The conversation drifted to other topics, but Valentino's words stuck in her mind. Did Geronimo really not value her? Or had he simply grown used to her always being there, always ready to sacrifice herself for the family? The party went on late into the night. Rodrigo walked Catalina back to the hotel, and they strolled along the promenade, listening to the surf and enjoying the coolness after the hot day. "Thank you for tonight," Catalina said. "I haven't relaxed like this in ages." "You needed it," Rodrigo replied. "You think too much about others and forget about yourself." They stopped at the hotel entrance, and under the streetlights, Rodrigo's face looked especially gentle and understanding. "Catalina," he said quietly, "there's something important I want to tell you." "What?" she asked, her pulse quickening. "These weeks, I've come to know you as a wonderful person and an excellent professional," he began. "But there's something more." He paused, searching for words, then suddenly leaned in and kissed her lightly on the lips. The kiss was tender, cautious, not demanding a response, but it spread a forgotten warmth through her body. "Forgive me," Rodrigo said, stepping back. "I didn't want to embarrass you. I just couldn't stay silent any longer." Catalina stood frozen, unable to say a word. When was the last time she had felt like a desirable woman, not just a wife and mother? "I need to go," she whispered and hurried into the hotel. In her room, she sat on the bed for a long time, pressing her fingers to her lips, trying to understand what was happening to her. Was this betrayal, or just a moment of weakness that meant nothing? But deep down, she knew this kiss meant a great deal. It meant she was still capable of attracting men, that there was something in her beyond maternal instinct and housekeeping. The phone rang at 1:30 in the morning. Catalina flinched. Late-night calls usually meant something bad. "Hello?" She heard Geronimo's anxious voice. "There's a situation. Emiliano is in the hospital." "What happened?" Her heart leapt into her throat. "Appendicitis," Geronimo said. "His stomach started hurting in the night. I thought it was just indigestion. Then it got worse. I called an ambulance. They're operating now." Catalina felt the world sway around her. Her little boy was lying on an operating table, and she was here, thousands of kilometers away, kissing another man. "How is he?" "What do the doctors say?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "They say they caught it in time. There shouldn't be complications," Geronimo replied, his voice heavy with exhaustion and fear. "But I'm scared, Catalina. I'm alone, and if something goes wrong..." "I'll take the first flight home," Catalina said without hesitation. "Really?" The gratitude in his voice squeezed her heart even tighter. "Of course. How could I be anywhere else when my son is sick?" "Thank you," Geronimo whispered. "I knew you wouldn't let us down." After the call, Catalina rushed around the room, packing her things, thinking only of how to get home as quickly as possible. All her doubts and torments about work and self-fulfillment suddenly seemed petty and insignificant compared to her son's illness. A mother's instinct proved stronger than all other feelings and desires. Her child needed her. That meant she had to be there, whatever it cost. Early in the morning, she went down to the hotel lobby to arrange her early departure. Behind the counter was the night clerk, sleepy and not very friendly. "I need to fly home urgently," she said. "My child is in the hospital." "I understand," the clerk nodded, "but a contract is a contract. If you leave early for personal reasons, the penalty is half of your earnings." Catalina was taken aback. Half the money, that was a serious amount, the very reason she had come here to work. "What if it's family circumstances?" she asked. "Family circumstances mean divorce or the death of a close relative," the clerk recited indifferently. "A child's illness is not grounds for terminating the contract without penalty." At that moment, Rodrigo walked up to the counter. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept all night either. "Catalina, what happened?" he asked when he saw her distressed face. "My son is in the hospital. He's having surgery," she explained. "I need to go home, but there's a penalty." "Wait a minute," Rodrigo said, and pulled the clerk aside. They spoke quietly for a few minutes, then Rodrigo came back to her. "It's all settled," he said. "There won't be any penalty." "I explained everything." "Thank you," Catalina said gratefully. "You're very kind." "It's not kindness," Rodrigo smiled sadly. "I just know there's no way to keep you here now." A mother's heart is stronger than any other feeling. An hour later, Consuelo was helping her carry her suitcase to the car that would take her to the airport. "It's a pity you're leaving," her friend said. "But I understand, of course. Children come first." "Consuelo, thank you for everything," Catalina said, hugging her. "For your friendship, for your support, for helping me feel alive again." "Nothing is ending," Consuelo replied. "Maybe we'll meet again someday." Rodrigo stood a little apart, silently watching her prepare to leave. When Catalina came to say goodbye, he took her hand and squeezed it. "I'm not asking you to promise me anything," he said quietly, "but know this, you'll always be welcome here. And not only as an employee." "Rodrigo, Catalina began, but he pressed a finger to her lips. "Don't say anything," he whispered. "Just remember that your life can hold more than duties. It can hold joy, too." On the plane, Catalina sat by the window, staring at the clouds and thinking about how quickly life could change. That morning, she had been a successful entertainer, feeling needed and valued for the first time in years. That evening, she was a mother who had dropped everything for her sick child. But did she really have a choice? Could she have stayed at work knowing her son was in the hospital? Of course not. Motherhood wasn't just a role. It was a state of soul that couldn't be switched off or ignored. Still, something in her had changed forever. She had discovered that she could be more than just a wife and mother. She could be an independent person. She had learned she could attract men, be an interesting companion, succeed at work. Now she had to find out whether she could combine those two sides of herself, family and professional, or whether she would be forced to choose between them. Rodrigo's kiss still lingered on her lips, a reminder that she was still a woman, not just a mother and wife. And that reminder would warm her in the long months ahead, when the reality of home life once again engulfed her. The plane descended for landing, and Catalina braced herself for the reunion with her husband, who was expecting a dutiful wife returning to her family obligations. But the woman who was coming home was no longer the same one who had left 3 months ago, and that promised serious changes in their married life. The airport greeted Catalina with familiar smells, and the bustle that had seemed natural 3 months ago, but now felt like a return to a past life. Geronimo was standing at the exit with a bouquet of wilted chrysanthemums, hastily bought at a kiosk. His face showed a mixture of relief, fatigue, and something else, surprise, which he tried to hide. "Catalina," he said, stepping up to her, his voice uncertain. "It's so good you're back." As she embraced her husband, Catalina felt her body automatically respond to the familiar touch, but something inside her stayed distant, as if she were watching the scene from the outside. Geronimo, too, had changed. He'd lost weight, dark circles had appeared under his eyes, and his clothes looked rumpled and careless. "How is Emiliano?" she asked, pulling away. "Better, the surgery went well," Geronimo replied, taking her suitcase. "He's being discharged tomorrow. He really misses you, keeps asking when Mom will come." On the way home, they spoke mostly about their son and his condition, avoiding more personal topics. Geronimo glanced sideways at his wife several times, as if trying to understand what had changed in her, but didn't dare ask outright. "You've got a tan," he remarked, "and you've slimmed down, I think." "The work was active," Catalina replied briefly, looking out the window at the familiar streets, which seemed gray and dull after the bright colors of the tropics. The apartment greeted them with the smell of stale air and the slight mess Geronimo had tried to clean up before her arrival, but traces of bachelor housekeeping were visible everywhere. On the kitchen table stood unwashed cups. In the sink lay a frying pan with leftover scrambled eggs, and on the fridge hung notes reminding him to buy milk and pick up clothes from the dry cleaner. "Sorry for the mess," Geronimo said awkwardly. "I meant to clean everything up, but I ran out of time." "It's all right," Catalina replied, though something tightened inside her at the realization that these walls once again surrounded her on all sides. Ismael came back from school half an hour later and greeted his mother with teenage restraint that barely concealed his joy. "Hi, Mom," he said, hugging her awkwardly. "So, how was the resort?" "Must have been fun." "I was working there, not on vacation," Catalina replied without any trace of offense in her voice. "Come on," Ismael smirked. "Dad said you were playing with kids by the sea." "Better than any holiday." At the hospital, Emiliano lay pale but with eyes shining with joy. When he saw his mother, he burst into tears of happiness and held her hand tightly, unwilling to let go. "Mom, I thought you wouldn't come," the boy sobbed. "Dad said you were too far away and couldn't." "Nonsense," Catalina said, kissing his forehead. "Mom will always come when you're sick." "And now you'll stay home?" "Forever?" Emiliano asked. Catalina looked at her husband, who was waiting for her answer as anxiously as their son. "Of course I'll stay," she said, but the words didn't sound as confident as she wished. The following days slipped into the familiar rhythm of life. Catalina cooked, cleaned, cared for Emiliano as he recovered, and met Ismael after school. Everything was as before, yet something indefinable in the family dynamic had shifted. Geronimo tried to be especially attentive, helping more with household chores than usual, but there was a note of caution in his behavior, as if he were afraid of making a wrong move. "Catalina, maybe we could go to the movies tomorrow," he suggested over dinner. "We haven't gone out together in ages." "All right," she agreed, though without enthusiasm. "Or maybe that new restaurant near the park," he went on. "They say the food is good." Catalina lifted her eyes and saw in his the strange mix of hope and anxiety. Geronimo was trying to steer their relationship back into its old channel, not realizing that the river had already changed course. "Geronimo, we need to talk," she said after the children had gone to bed. "About what?" he asked warily. "About us. About what happens next." They sat in the kitchen under the lamplight, the air tense like before a storm. I've changed, Catalina began. Over these months, I've learned a lot about myself, about what I want from life. And what do you want? Geronimo asked, irritation creeping into his voice. I want to keep working, Catalina said firmly. Not just running the house, but having my own work, my colleagues, my own income. But why? Geronimo frowned. You've already earned enough for the car. Why do you need more work? Because I feel alive when I work, Catalina explained. I'm needed not only as a mother and wife, but as a professional too. Don't you see? Geronimo sat in silence, digesting her words. His face reflected a struggle of conflicting emotions. And what about the family? He asked at last. The kids? Me? Do we suddenly become less important to you? The family will always be the most important, Catalina said gently, but not the only thing. I want to be a good mother and wife, but I don't want to stop being myself. And what if I say I don't want a working wife? Geronimo snapped. What if I want you at home, like before? Catalina looked at him long and steadily. Then we have a problem, she said calmly, because there's no going back. There was a firmness in her voice Geronimo had never heard before. It wasn't hysteria nor whim. It was the quiet determination of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. Catalina, what happened to you? He asked in confusion. You've become someone else. I've become myself, she answered. My real self, not a shadow living by someone else's needs. The next few days in the house were tense. Geronimo tried to behave as usual, but he kept catching himself studying his wife, as if searching for traces of the obedient Catalina he used to know. But Catalina really had changed. She still cooked and cleaned, still cared for the children, but she did it as an equal member of the family, not as a silent servant. She voiced her opinions, disagreed with her husband's decisions when she didn't like them, and planned her day without asking for permission. Mom, you've become different, Ismael remarked at breakfast. More, I don't know, more confident, maybe? And you don't like that? Catalina asked. On the contrary, I do, the teenager admitted honestly. You're more like a real person now, not just a robot who only cooks and cleans. Those words from his son struck Geronimo harder than all of his wife's arguments. Had she really seemed like a robot? Had he truly not noticed how she dissolved into household chores, losing herself in the process? A week after Catalina's return, the phone rang. Geronimo picked it up and heard a man's voice with a slight coastal accent. May I speak to Catalina? The stranger asked. And who's asking? Geronimo said warily. Rodrigo, a colleague from work. A vacancy has opened up, and I wanted to offer it to her. Geronimo silently handed the phone to his wife and stayed in the kitchen, making no attempt to hide that he was listening. Rodrigo, hi, Catalina said, and there was a note of joy in her voice that hadn't been there for days. How are you? How's your son? The man's voice asked. He's doing well, recovering quickly, Catalina answered. And how's the end of the season? Fine, but without you, it's not the same. Listen, we've got an opening at the City Cultural Center, head of children's programs. Good conditions, decent salary in dollars. If you'd like, I can recommend you. Geronimo saw his wife's eyes light up and realized that the struggle for her had only just begun. I'll think about it, Catalina said. Thank you for the offer. Think, but not too long, Rodrigo urged. People like you are hard to find. After the call, a heavy silence settled over the house. Geronimo waited for his wife to tell him about the offer, but she said nothing. She simply washed the dishes and hummed softly to herself. Interesting call, he finally muttered. Yes, interesting, Catalina agreed. And what are you going to do? I'm thinking, she replied shortly. That evening, Catalina announced her decision. I want to try, she said at family dinner. It's a good job, creative, with children. And what about us? Aren't we important? Geronimo asked. You are important, Catalina answered firmly. That's why I'm telling you about it, instead of just leaving. I want us to learn to live differently. Differently how? Ismael asked. Differently so that each of us can be ourselves, Catalina explained. Papa, a good husband and father, but not a dictator. You, good sons, but not little princes with someone always cleaning up after you. And me, a good wife and mother, but not a powerless servant. Sounds nice, Geronimo said sarcastically. But what if I don't want to live differently? What if I like the way things were before? Catalina looked at him calmly, sadly. Then we'll have to decide what's more important, your habits or our family. That conversation was a turning point. Geronimo realized his wife would no longer quietly submit to his decisions, and the children saw in their mother not only a caring woman, but also a strong personality. The following weeks passed in negotiations and compromises. Geronimo resisted the changes, but gradually began to understand that a happy, self-fulfilled wife was far better than a gloomy, repressed housewife. "All right," he said one evening, "we'll try your experiment. But if the family starts falling apart?" "The family won't fall apart," Catalina replied with quiet certainty. "It will grow stronger because it will be built on mutual respect, not submission." The first months of their new life were difficult. Geronimo had to learn all over again how to be the husband of a working woman, how to share the household chores, accept her fatigue after a long day, and respect her right to have her own interests. The boys, too, had to adjust to the idea that their mother wasn't always available, that she had her own schedule and her own responsibilities. But little by little, they began to feel proud of her. Their mother was working, she was respected, she was even mentioned in the local newspaper as a successful organizer of children's events. "Dad, our mom is awesome," Emiliano said one day. "All the kids in my class want her to come to our school and run the holiday party." Geronimo looked at his son and realized the boy wasn't proud of his mother for cooking a good sancocho, but because she was an interesting, talented person in her own right. And Catalina blossomed before their eyes. Work gave her energy and joy, which she brought back home. She became a more engaging conversationalist, a livelier companion, and a more passionate wife. "You know," Geronimo said one evening, holding her in his arms, "I'm starting to realize I was a fool." "In what way?" Catalina asked. "I wanted to keep you in a cage, but all I would have had was a dead bird," he admitted with a sad smile. "Instead, I have a wife I can be proud of." A year after her return, the family looked completely different. Geronimo had learned to cook and clean, the boys had become more independent and responsible, and Catalina combined the role of loving mother with that of a successful professional woman. "Mom," Ismael asked before his graduation, "do you regret leaving to work back then?" Catalina thought for a moment, remembering that day 3 years earlier when Geronimo had brought home the job offer at the resort. "You know," she said, "I don't regret anything. Not leaving, not coming back, because it helped all of us become better. And if Dad hadn't let you work, then we would have had to find another way," Catalina answered honestly. "But I believed he loved me enough to want to see me happy." That evening, she stood on the balcony of their apartment, looking out at the familiar courtyard and reflecting on the path she had walked. The windows of neighboring houses glowed in the dark, each containing families with their own joys and struggles. Geronimo came out and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how much can change in just a few months," Catalina replied, "and about how sometimes you have to lose yourself in order to find yourself." "And did you find yourself?" "Yeah," she said with quiet confidence. "I found myself, and I didn't lose my family." "Isn't that a miracle?" They stood together on the balcony, watching the stars above the sleeping city. Ahead of them lay an ordinary life with its joys and hardships. But now they knew that any problem could be solved, so long as each member of the family remained true to themselves and respected the other's right to their own path. Catalina's story did not end with a loud finale, but with a quiet understanding that true love does not confine, but liberates, does not demand, but inspires, and that a family becomes truly strong only when each of its members can say, "I am here not because I must, but because I want to be." Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is priceless to us. Support with a like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. May your day be bright. See you soon.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.